Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening again. And welcome to this auspicious event, the first annual Christopher Colliday Lecture on Business Integrity.
Integrity, which is what we've been asked to speak about, as an attribute has been found to be the most influential and distinguishing equality with regard to the success of businesses. Integrity is a concept of consistency of actions, values, methods, measures, principles, expectations, and outcomes. At its core, integrity must start at the helm, beginning with the company's leader who understands the qualities of integrity, which then filters and percolate down through the organization. And it should affect every member's approach and attitude to work and conduct. In fact, when business integrity is present throughout the deepest layers of a company and not just at the surface, it becomes the heart and soul. Call it the DNA of the company. And that could mean the difference between a company that succeeds and a company that falters. Integrity should thus be embedded in the very foundation and heart of a business so that it does not falter. The importance and practice of good corporate governance cannot be overemphasized, and companies that play strictly by the rules become investors' delight and also very attractive for possible cross-border listings. Such companies distinguish themselves from others. On the other hand, companies that do not adhere to and practice good corporate governance do get penalized, as such companies, for example, could easily get rejected when they try to do cross-border listings.
Can I ask Mr. Gbenga Oyebode, member of the Federal Republic and Senior Advocate of Nigeria, to come and give us the first annual Christopher Colliday Lecture. Mr. Oyebode.
What's the message for Nigeria? The message is that corruption cannot, or at least in the way that corruption continues to grow in Nigeria, that it's unsustainable to grow a nation like Nigeria, even with all the nice data and statistics that I have reeled out, that it's unsustainable to build an economy or a country with significant corruption or significant unethical behavior.
First, we would like to divide the awards into two groups. There's the first three who will be given, although they're all being given an award for the same reason, but I'd like to mention that we'll give the second group first, and the first group would be last. There were a group of people who actually came to the rescue of a few young people who came in 1997 to make a presentation at the Chamber of Commerce, and they got the shock of their lives when lots of business people they'd looked up to all their lives said, "Young man, we're sorry, we cannot support anything that sounds like anti-corruption because anti-corruption is anti-government, and we would like to sleep in our own beds." This was a shock, well, to some of us who were making the presentation at the time. The first group were the people who were incensed at what their colleagues were saying, and they rose up to our defense there and then, and they fought with their colleagues on the floor of the chamber. But the second group, they now went, the first group went ahead to now enlist some of their colleagues to come and give reinforcement and support the starting of some kind of movement. I know that in those days, and I know Professor Oshibajo will bear me witness, we said we'd like to be that matchstick that starts the bushfire. If in the end the fire consumes the matchstick, it's all fine, so long as the fire continues. That's all we have as an expectation, because we kept reminding ourselves that this is probably like a missionary journey. You'll probably never complete it in your own lifetime. So don't start looking for milestones where there are no milestones. It's all about getting it started. It was a time where people complained about human rights abuses, And a few of us said, well, people's rights are being abused because they're exposing corruption. And we think corruption is the main issue. And it was very difficult to get anybody to support us at that time. So that is where I'm going to go. And before I continue, I'd like to invite Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who is our vice chairman, to actually come on the stage and help with the presentations. Professor Osinbajo. The first recipient of the award it's going to the late Ambassador Professor Gabriel Olusoya. At a point, he was in charge of the Nigerian Institute of Management. Before that, he was at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs as well. And I know that he had a hard time trying to convince his council to adopt and get involved in the business integrity movement. Angered that he could not get through, he decided to come personally and sign the Convention on Business Integrity as an individual. And that is what we're recognizing tonight. Because without people like that, the whole discourse, the whole debate, and I know in Prof's words, he used to say, let's get the issue on the front burner. At least when it's discussed as a national issue, then we would have made some progress.
The next awardee tonight is Dr. Michael Omonayo. He's also someone who Dr. Yusuf picked up the phone and only had to speak to him for a few minutes before he could see the passion come through his own voice as well. And when he decided that this must be done, and not only did he sign up to the Convention on Business Integrity, he also signed his company up in 1997, at a time when people were not concerned about the issue of business integrity. He salutes you. It's the same inscription. Last but not least in this category is the person that Ike had alluded to, who has a connection to the musical society of Nigeria. Is Mr. Akitola Williams, who will come. Because again, for Mr. Akitola Williams, it was only a phone call from Dr. Kolade, and because involved, he has everything documented. He was here today before that and even before the rule of law, but this is Nigeria's first chartered accountant. I will start with the late surveyor Adekunle Kukoyi, who was one of the people who actually spoke up as well in that day. So on behalf of the board of the Convention on Business Integrity, we would like to present this award. Professor Patrick Okenachi Utomi. In Nigeria, he was a presidential aspirant. He's somebody who has inspired us with his work on Isusu and Ajo and what is written about institutions and political economy in this country, some of which went into the creation of the rating system for the Convention on Business Integrity. This is where some of the ideas
Came from in the first place. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, sir. Prof. but not the least. In the room that same day, in the same chamber, there was one person who not only rose to our defense, but proceeded to give a lecture to all the senior people who were in the room at the time, followed us outside, gave us his card, and said we should come and see him. Anybody we needed to see, in order for this to materialize, he would ensure that we could see them. 2 years later, we went back to him after all his help and said, well, we think you better come and chair this whole thing and help give it the kind of direction that we need. I don't think he needs any more introduction, Prof. Who is he?
Dr. Christopher Kolade. Here you are.
It's heavy, sir. This is very heavy.
And sometimes they will remember that when I finally agreed to become chairman of CBI, I said to them, all right, you know I'm very busy, and you know I'm not young anymore. I'll do this for 2 years, and then you can find your way around how to do it. That was in 1997. This is 2013, and our 2 years have not expired yet. But the reason why those 2 years have got extended is that I look at these two people, and I say, really, if I left them now, if I deserted them because I have something better to do, I might regret it. Because there's something about trying to improve your environment that if you think you can do it, and you don't do it, and other people do it the way it should not be done, you can die before your time. At the end of the day, whatever you have, whether it is good health, or strength, or sharp faculty, or just a motivation to do good, they're all gifts of Almighty God. And if you want to serve Almighty God, if you don't want to betray Him, use your gifts to improve your situation. And that is what He is going to bless. And it is His blessing that brings the good results. God bless you.
The Convention on Business Integrity, CBI, a company limited by guarantee, is a business membership organization established in 1997 and incorporated in 2003 with a mission of promoting ethical business practices, transparency, and fair competition in the private and public sectors. The CBI recently put together the second annual Christopher Kolade Lecture on Business Integrity at the ballroom of the Lagos Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island. The theme was The Business Case for Business Integrity. Speaker was Ms. Aruma Ote, Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission. As expected, the business community turned out in their numbers for the lecture this year. Welcoming his guest, Mr. Soji Apampa, Executive Director, CBI, said that integrity is still a deficiency in most businesses in Nigeria.
We found it necessary to have a lecture series on business integrity because we feel business integrity is still not what drives the ethos and the business model of many businesses in Nigeria.
And we feel that that integrity deficiency continues to limit the competitiveness of the Nigerian economy as a whole. Why have we named this lecture series after our distinguished former chairman? It's because he, throughout his working life in the different sectors of society where he has worked, he has exemplified the ideals of business integrity.
In the contemporary business world, integrity is one of the most sought-after qualities not only of individual employees but of companies. Joining his voice to welcome participants to the lecture, Dr. Christopher Kolade put forward some thought-provoking questions.
And we must ask ourselves the question, why is it that so many people in business have not yet committed themselves to doing business with integrity? Why is it that we find ourselves discovering day after day that there's still a wide gap between what we all know to be right and what we actually do? And I believe that this is one of the reasons why the Convention on Business Integrity decided to start this series of lectures. And tonight we're looking at the business case for business integrity.
People often define integrity as doing the right thing even when no one else is around. It is the ability to act with honesty and be consistent in whatever it is you are doing based on the particular moral, value, or belief compass in place. Delivering the theme of the lecture this year, the business case for business integrity, Ms. Ote, DG SEC, said that there is need for paradigm shift among business managers. According to her, to become competitive in today's global economy, companies and public institutions must imbibe global best practices.
Nigeria did better than only Argentina and Venezuela on the issue of diversion of public funds. We were ranked 142 out of 144. On the issue of payment of bribes, should I go on? We were ranked 135. So have I made the case that if Nigeria is misunderstood and ranked lower than it should be, which is what I believe, and which is often the case, for me is not the issue. What is the issue is that we must have a paradigm shift where we focus more on proper conduct to become competitive and remain relevant in today's global economy. Our companies and public institutions must also imbibe international best practice in every sense of that word. But I think we should even do better. We should exceed what the global standards are and be the benchmark that others focus on.
Trust and integrity are inextricably connected. Individuals and organizations use the presence or absence of integrity to determine whether an extension of trust is warranted. The panel discussion at the lecture provided a platform for sharing practical experience on business integrity. Panelists were Professor Joan Elegido, Vice Chancellor, Pan-Atlantic University; Mrs. Bola Adeshola, MD CEO, Standard Chartered Bank Nigeria Limited; Mr. Lolu Akinwumi, Group CEO, Prima Garnet Africa; Ms. Ayotola Jagun, Chief Compliance Officer and Company Secretary, Oando PLC; and Mr. Michael Lokota, MD CEO, Siemens Limited Nigeria. Moderator was Mr. Okpeyemi Agbaje, Senior Consultant, CEO, RTC Advisory Services Limited. Nigeria has been repeatedly labeled one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Over the last 5 consecutive rounds of the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, Nigeria scored less than 2.8 points, putting it into the same group with countries like Honduras, Pakistan, and Togo. This perceived all-encompassing culture of corruption gives the impression that there is practically no room for anyone to operate outside its borders. A strong consensus has grown that if Nigeria is to develop, the battle against corruption must be fought on different battlefields. The key objective of CBI is to provide an alternative to the perceived all-encompassing culture of corruption, showing that there are other ways of behaving and doing business in a highly corrupt environment like Nigeria.
The chairman of today's event and chairman of the National Anti-Corruption Committee, Professor Issei Sage, SAN. I'll quickly do some protocols so that we can put that behind us. The representative of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Integrity and CBI, the Convention on Business Integrity, distinguished members, panelists who will talk with us later today, civil society representatives, the press, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this event. Of course, our distinguished guest, His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Oluyemi Osinbajo, SAN, GCON, represented by our chairman, who will also be wearing 2 caps. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to this important conversation on how to fund in a sustainable manner anti-corruption efforts in Nigeria. CBI and the Integrity Organization are 2 sides of a coin. The Integrity Organization focuses on government, the public sector, national life, while the Convention on Business Integrity focuses on the private sector. But the mission is the same: to increase transparency, to increase accountability, to reduce corruption both in the public and the private space, and to build a society based on integrity and sustainable behavior. I acknowledge that in some way today's event implicitly honors both of them. Professor Osinbajo's birthday was 2 days ago, but in particular honors our Executive Director, Soji Apampa, who is 50 years old today. Let me say a few words quickly about the work of the Integrity Organization and Convention of Business Integrity, and tie those words I will say to the theme of today's conversation. CBI and the Integrity Organization are about seeking structural and sustainable solutions to the quagmire of corruption. Like I said, both in the private sector and in government. In the case of CBI, I would like to focus on one activity or one solution each of CBI and the Integrity Organization. CBI has come up with something we're very proud of called the Corporate Governance Rating System. It's been adopted by the Nigerian Stock Exchange. It's a system by which the Nigerian economy rates and ranks organizations quoted on the exchange for governance and integrity. Like I said, that scheme has been adopted by the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and it's the foundation, a key element of the premium board that the exchange has now introduced. So in effect, there's now a cost for anti-corporate governance, if you may say so, and a benefit for good corporate governance on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. On the side of the integrity organization, I would like to stress one particular mechanism, egunje.info, which is a whistleblower portal for anti-corruption with a huge potential as a sustainable tool for fighting corruption. The idea being that Nigerians from anywhere in the country can report requests for corruption on egunje.info. Imagine the ramifications if we found a solution, as I urge us to do today, by which we can fund egunje.info on a sustainable and structural basis, such that it became the default of a Nigerian when combated with a request for corruption.
I welcome you all, and I wish us all a successful meeting. Thank you very much.
This is the speech of the Vice President. As you all know, this administration came into office on the back of an unprecedented call and mandate for change from the people of Nigeria to, amongst other things, tackle the insecurity in the Northeast, curb corruption, and fix Nigeria's ailing economy. On the second issue, that is corruption, the subject around which we are all gathered here today, also unprecedented is the demonstration of the political will to fight corruption regardless of whose ox is God. This administration has moved decisively against those who acted with impunity in the handling of public funds meant for the defense of our nation. Very careful planning is needed to ensure our objectives attained, given its systemic nature and the highly interconnected network of actors involved. For this reason, one of the early steps we took was to establish a Presidential Advisory Committee against corruption. This committee has been working very hard behind the scenes, advising the government and suggesting various courses of action. You will be happy to know that one of the courses of action put forward is the need to consider and adopt a national strategy to combat corruption. Various meetings have been held with a number of stakeholders, groups, and more rounds of consultations are planned to ensure Nigerians can speak with one voice in articulating what we need to do to bring the menace of corruption under control. I would like to seize this opportunity to formally signal to all stakeholder groups that this administration realizes the fight against corruption can neither be won nor sustained without you. It is without Nigerians generally. We therefore call on business, on the media, civil society, labor, youth groups, religious and traditional institutions, and all well-meaning Nigerians to stop standing on the sidelines and instead positively engage in this fight against corruption. For only when the people act decisively against it can corruption stop. Today's symposium is aptly titled, as it has become, as you can well imagine, the major challenge to adequately fund and sustain most things, anti-corruption efforts inclusive under current economic conditions. We therefore eagerly await the results of your deliberations today, and through the mechanism of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Corruption, we promise to carefully consider all recommendations that arise from this symposium. Thank you very much, and we wish you very fruitful deliberations. In addition to direct funding by the federal government, I would like to propose that a small proportion of proceeds of crime recovered by each anti-corruption agency should be allocated to that agency for the funding of its activities. In this regard, I would like to suggest that the figure of 5% from the proceeds of crime thus recovered should be given to that agency. This will not only relieve the government of the duty of 100% funding of each agency, but will also galvanize the agencies into greater effectiveness and productivity.
How should we fund and sustain anti-corruption efforts when they're driven by the state? How should we fund and sustain anti-corruption efforts when they're driven by non-state actors? And we will have two panels to deal with each of those subjects. So for the first panel, join me in making welcome Mr. Oliver Blake, who is the team leader for governance and social development from the UK Aid. Please, if you would come and join us on the platform. I would like to call on Mr. Kehinde Bolaji, also from the United Nations Development Programme. Please, a round of applause for him as he comes on stage as well. Mr. Samuel Kaninda from Transparency International Berlin. Ms. Lillian Ekeanyanwu from TUGA, which is the Technical Unit on Government Anti-Corruption Reforms.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. If I may stand on existing protocol. And also, Soji, let me also wish you a very happy birthday. And indeed, anybody else in this room who has a birthday today, as I'm sure there may well be, there may well be others. As we have heard from our distinguished speakers so far, corruption is an extremely important topic. Indeed, it's perhaps the most important topic in that it destroys so much that both government and society try to do. And indeed, in many ways, the opposite of development. As we have heard, sustaining anti-corruption effort is incredibly important, but also actually quite difficult. Defeating corruption is about long-term change. There are a number of cases around the world where countries have launched themselves on anti-corruption drives with strong leadership from a president, but after a couple of years it's sort of petered away and it hasn't been continued through. And of course, once pressure is off from the top, if habits haven't changed, people return to old ways. And it's extremely important to maintain that continued drive and indeed to build those good habits of behaviour so that in many ways the way society works and systems work reinforce good behaviours rather than bad behaviours. So I think my first point is that, as we have already heard, sustaining the fight against corruption is not just the role of the state, it's not just the role of the President or His Excellency the Vice President who represented here. It is the role of society as a whole. So it needs that leadership from the top, but it also needs strong commitment from civil society, it needs the private sector and business, and it does also need the international community. Let me come now briefly to funding. Now, a lot of the things that I think we've been talking about don't necessarily need much money. Transparency systems in government. It is not necessarily about how much money, it's about what you do. Much of ensuring people in government do the jobs that they are paid to do rather than do something else. So a lot of it is about using the resources that exist correctly rather than incorrectly. And yes, there are some funds needed in terms of developing new systems, but in practice, from a government perspective, a lot of the work on anti-corruption should more than pay for itself. As we've been hearing, if we're talking about recovering assets, the proposal of 5% of those assets used indeed to fund the anti-corruption effort. If your systems are better, if, for example, before, if you're only using 10% of your resources properly and then you use 50% properly, you're going to get a huge more out of it. So from the government's perspective, the fight against corruption should enable a much higher percentage of Nigerian resources actually to be used for the benefit of the people. So from that point of view, I think a lot of the funding for the anti-corruption effort will come indeed from the success from that. Equally on the business side, a freer and fairer business environment should mean more competitive business, better business, more open business, more investment. And of course, revenues from that should then be taxed. So if government improves the efficiency and integrity of the taxation system, along with an economy which is more competitive and has stronger growth, then indeed there will be greater government revenues also.
On that note, I would say that Nigeria is lucky to have in power a government that has the political will to fight corruption. That is a critical element in anti-corruption efforts in any country, and it has been one of the missing links in the country's history of anti-corruption. But in addition to the political will, you want to look at also the way the government has balanced preventive and prosecutorial approaches. You have very strong action on the part of the anti-corruption agencies to investigate and prosecute those people found to have been involved in financial malfeasance in the past. But you also have strong will on the part of the government to put in place preventive measures. For example, the Treasury single account and the use of the efficiency units to block leakages within the MDAs. I think it is urgent for stakeholders to come together and get an anti-corruption strategy for Nigeria that is inclusive, that is implementable, and that is not focused only on what government can do. All these other stakeholders should be brought on board and be active in the adoption of the strategy as well as its operationalization.
I will contribute to this debate by making reference to a policy document which was adopted at the global level in 2012, which is what is called the Jakarta Principle on Anti-Corruption Agencies. That document or that policy talked about how to strengthen the effectiveness of anti-corruption agencies and contains many elements, some of which have to do with the funding of those agencies as well as the funding of the anti-corruption agenda. I'll focus on the elements that talk mostly about how to fund the agencies and their effectiveness. At the moment, the situation we have in Nigeria is where most of the anti-corruption agencies draw their expertise in sophisticated crimes externally, especially white-collar crimes. We do not have sufficient resources within the agencies to stay a step ahead of criminals in those areas. So they expend a lot of resources, drawing this expertise from outside. And this is because the public service structure within which they operate cannot afford to bring in those resources in-house. This is something that should be examined. The ACAs must be adequately resourced, so with enough resources to bring in those expertise and have them in-house. Secondly, we talk about, there has also been talk about the budgetary allocation of those agencies. At the moment, they are also squeezed into the public service budgetary system, when in fact the sector they are dealing with is very mutative and they need to respond in that manner. Now, there have also been conversations about financial autonomy, which is also an element within the Jakarta Principles. How do we operationalize this financial autonomy? Locally, there have been conversations about putting the ACAs on the first line charge, There have also been conversations about allowing them to retain a percentage of the profits of the assets they recover. At the moment, assets recovered, the proceeds from assets recovered flow only in one direction. It goes into the designated accounts within government, and there is no channel for it to flow back except through the normal appropriation process. Now, the draft Proceeds of Crime bill is already proposing what Professor Sagi has expounded this morning, that they be allowed to retain a percentage of the recoveries. I support that assertion that we should, within that framework, have an accountable process to enable them to retain a part of the proceeds recovered. This will not only be an incentive, it will also ensure that they are more proactive in terms of their processes.
Actually, yes. So the one on the what needs to be funded, I will agree with all my predecessors that there's a need for a guiding framework for anyone to support, even the state itself, to put resources, and I'm not looking at it only in terms of financial resources, but resources, human resources, technical and material resources. There need to be that strategy that defines, yes, we understand what the issues are, what are the problems, but where do we see ourselves in a period of 5 to 7 years? And what is achievable within a year? There were promises that were made, especially by the current administration, in terms of what they could do to relieve the burden that corruption places on ordinary citizens. And also to integrate the issue of anti-corruption into the broader development agenda of the country. In the same way that this has been done at the UN level, the Global Development Framework, which are called Sustainable Development Goals, have embedded Goal 16, which speaks specifically, among other things, to the need for more transparency, accountability, and participation as preventive ways of addressing the issue of corruption.
You will agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that from everything that has been said, having a clear vision for change, having a clear strategy that is owned and has been contributed to in an inclusive way by all stakeholders in the country is indispensable. And that has come from all the speeches. You will also agree with me that clarifying the operating model is important. How do we finance that strategy? How should it be resourced and driven? In fact, from what Samuel said, who should drive what? Who should be involved? How do we incentivize the different stakeholder groups who will be involved in the fight against corruption? And the discussion has gone around the operating model, how to get the stakeholders buy-in, and the kind of tactics that are employed. So if you return to this sheet that you have in there, you'll find that we have gone quite a way down, from starting on the mandate and policies, looking at political will and the tone at the top, the vision and strategy, the operating model, stakeholder buy-in. We're beginning to touch on the tactics. And I am sure that in the next next panel session, we will definitely touch on the tactics.
So we've come to talk about how the best way to fund anti-corruption efforts in Nigeria. And I would say if the government had a budget for anti-corruption, the first thing I would say is how do we reduce those costs? How do we halve it? Or in essence, how do we reduce it to a more manageable value? And the reason I would ask that question first is because I think the Nigerian economy is going through tough times. So calling on the government to be the only supporter or investor in anti-corruption initiatives will not work. Private sector, civil society, the taxes get really creative, and also citizens get really creative about how we decide to either fund or cut the costs of addressing corruption. So, and to use that as an opener, I'll move into how Siemens comes to be a player on this stage. Siemens about 10 years ago had in Nigeria was sanctioned for passing seeds with the government regarding government contracts in Nigeria. We also went into an agreement with the government and paid a heavy fine to have those sanctions removed. Soon after that, we have a global initiative set up by Siemens called the Siemens Integrity Initiative, under which we have been funding anti-corruption efforts all over the world. In Nigeria, the most prominent result of this initiative was the corporate governance rating system of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which we implemented in this year. Should be creative in implementing tools to incentivize private organizations to actually invest in anti-corruption efforts. So it could be as a result of cutting taxes or other operational expenses or doing business in Nigeria, but really private companies would willingly, I believe, willingly spend enough on addressing those roadblocks that, in essence, come back to haunt them. So if someone has mandated Siemens to address the issues at the ports, for example, we would willingly invest because we could directly tie to our finances and see how that is having a direct cost reduction on the delays we've experienced in such an agency.
That's the most important thing about the corruption drive, is to change the attitude, the way of doing business. I think that's the greatest achievement that we can pass on, is the change of business attitudes. And in the industry where we work closely with the government, it has to come on both sides. And the change of attitude has come from both sides. So firstly, we had to embrace integrity as a key business performance indicator for us and transform that integrity to our stakeholders. So you can have all the integrity speeches and slogans and policies at the board level, but if on the ground at your depots, at your petrol stations, your tanker drivers, that does not transcend, then the battle is lost. So awareness is a very key function for us. We support a lot of awareness drives, we support a lot of education, but we first had to take it internally first. So my board had to go through a full integrity check. They had to go through understanding what governance was, how governance plays a part in the daily functions of 40 law, and more importantly, how governance and integrity affect the numbers of a company. I think CBI and the stock exchange have done a fantastic job in introducing the rating system, because for the first time now in Nigeria, publicly listed companies like ours can see a direct effect. When you start to see a reduction in FDIs coming into your exchange, and governance is playing a key part of that, everybody sits up. Not only does your chief risk officer sit up, your CFO will sit up and take it forward. So we have to do that internally first and transcend that.
From the perspective of the Committee of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks, when we came together in 2007 as Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria, what was uppermost in our minds was, how can we take competition out of ensuring that we keep the bad guys out of the system? How can we work together to have a level playing field and make compliance with the requirements of regulation to help check excesses of the bad guys, collectively better in the system? And so when we came together, we then also brought in our regulators and the law enforcement agencies. So today, since 2007, we have grown to be a body that has brought together all key critical stakeholders in our efforts to ensure that we check and make sure that what needs to be done, both in terms of the tactical and the framework and methodologies that have been put in place, that they are working in our various institutions towards the fight against corruption, money laundering, criminal activities, and so on and so forth. And so that is what the Committee of Compliance Officers actually stands for today. And what are we doing in our effort to also help in fighting corruption? As the Chief Compliance Officers of our institutions, we are expected to make sure that we maintain the frameworks that have been set up in our organization to fight corruption, crime, money laundering, and so on and so forth. So what we are doing is that we are always almost on a daily basis talking to ourselves. So the criminals will not have, just like my colleague said, that you go to one place and then you meet a brick wall, you go to the other side and then you are accepted in. But what we've done is that if a criminal comes to a bank today with illicit funds, he will meet the same kind of brick wall if you go to all the other banks in Nigeria. That is what we have achieved today. And that's why when we came up, when the central bank came up with the BVN, today you hear stories of people whose money is now being brought out from Sakaway pits. Because we can't take it to the banks anymore. And if you talk of corruption, the conduits, financial institutions are the major conduits where corruption actually, it helps corruption to grow. And so if we don't have measures within our institutions to check the flow of illicit funds, then it means we cannot sustain the fight against corruption. And so to be able to do that effectively, the regulation around corruption needs to be more improved. And also address so that there could be sustainability. And lastly, I just want to make one very important, based on what my colleague from Siemens said, incentivizing the organizations. We should have in place, as part of the trust fund that is being recommended, maybe we should have what we call corruption tax. So that as we make tax deductions, people will continuously be reminded that we are making contributions towards fighting corruption. And that money goes straight to that fund. And I believe if we do that, it will help us to continuously ensure that funds are available to fight corruption. Egunje.com is something that is fantastic. But I wonder if you all know how it's been funded. We all need to find a way of contributing even to such social media services, so that you can, because these are the easiest means by which you can reach out to the larger population. We need to fund it. So I think I would like to leave it here so that you can also have other contributions. Thank you.
Media is always left behind. And the part of it motivating is where we think it's all about giving precious and all of that to press, to publish. You see, every day you have the public, the private sector, coming to us with press releases and agenda to promote. And you leave behind what is the very germane role of the media. If you look at the economic challenges that policymakers are supposed to tackle, you see poverty reduction, you see trying to close the gap of inequality, and two major things are used to achieve this. One is taxation, the other is anti-corruption effort. Taxation to get more to use in promoting poverty reduction initiatives. And then you use anti-corruption campaign and effort. Use it majorly to, block leakages and also to, this kind of discourage every misappropriation of government funds or public funds that is in the hands of public officials. Now, anti-corruption agencies, which are state actors, are used to do this. And we leave behind the fact that if the legislature is strengthened, you strengthen the judiciary, and then you make sure that all other state actors like ICPC, EFCC are strengthened. There is one role that the media has played over time. I look at all the persons on this panel with me. I can see how much that investigative journalism has helped in this country in even exposing some of these illicit activities. You will tell how, for the case of Premium Times, We've been instrumental to cases of Malabo oil scandal, we've been instrumental to other cases in the oil and gas sector, we've been instrumental to even exposing the, the cement scandal that was in the past. And if you're going to fund anti-corruption, you need to start looking at how to also fund investigative journalism in the country. You need to also look at how not to weaken the media. There is a legislative in the parliament right now, the bill that is looking for how to frustrate social media. If you weaken the media, if you weaken investigative journalism in Nigeria, then we can't sustain anti-corruption efforts in the country. So, from both sides of financing the media and also strengthening it in terms of press freedom, we need to start looking at those as efforts of government, efforts of private sector to push the agenda of the media. Thank you.
I've heard very clearly from this panel that collective action is very important. You cannot leave it to the government alone. You need the government, you need business, you need civil society. We were also told, or there was a suggestion also from Tifase, that innovation might be needed to cut costs. That it's not only about putting more and more and more money, it's looking for smarter and smarter ways of doing it, and perhaps embracing technology and so on could help us to start to think of new ways and new methods and tactics we can employ in the fight against corruption. But the biggest takeaway I have, apart from the issue of ensuring that we involve the media, and I think that the role of investigative journalism is very clearly spelled out. But the big thing is incentives for each stakeholder group. That yes, business can play a role. There's a role that business should have been playing that we're not taking advantage of because we don't have the incentives in place. There's a role that the media could be playing, but there are no incentives for the media. And I think you can go on even to civil society and other groups in society. And I think all of those issues, finding answers to those issues should be part of the operating model. It should be very clear, because it shouldn't just be about collecting money and dumping with one agency. We have to think very clearly through that if we did spend a penny, what would be the result of that spending?
Let me also say clearly that I agree with most of the positions that talk about establishment of trust fund, tax systems, and all of that. But let me start with the premise. Someone said we needed strategy. I know we're working on strategies that will soon be adopted at national level. But let me say that most of the fight against corruption we've been doing so far is likenable to fighting the monkey that eats the fruits on the tree, abandoning the termites that's eating the roots of the tree. Both approaches are very, very critical. And I think whatever it is that we are doing, we need to look closely, not only at grand scale corruption, but to understand that corruption itself feeds on three other key pillars, which have bedeviled our system massively. And those three other key pillars is that of indiscipline, wastage, and impunity. They are tied, they are the three other legs on which corruption ties.
My job is made very easy. The chairman has basically, so he has been wrapping up what has been happening. So what I will do is to just give the vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank the chairman, who has won 2 caps. That of the vice president is not used to wear the vice president's cap, and at the same time the PAC cap. We thank him very much for chairing the occasion, and also for the panelists, the 2 panel members of the 2 panels that have been doing. We want to thank them also for their wonderful contribution, as we can see, providing us with solutions. Then also the sponsors, various sponsors, corporate as well as public, that have been here. Also different people that have been there, the IG office, the CBN and others I cannot mention for want of time. And then also for people that have contributed in one way or the other with comment, questions, although we couldn't exhaust it all, which has shown the kind of interest this thing has engendered. And we want to thank the member of the public for also attending. Most of all, also, I wish to extend our thanks to Soji and then also Professor Shibanjo for co-founding something that has 20 years later metamorphosized into CBI and then providing the leadership. And then also the various members and staff of CBI and directors who have also put this initiative on the line. So ladies and gentlemen, we say thank you very much and then wish you a safe journey back home. Thank you very much.